The evening started like any other for Emily Dawson, a quiet woman in her early 30s who lived in a small house on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Her life was simple, predictable even, and she liked it that way. After a long week at work, she looked forward to spending her Friday night relaxing at home with her loyal companion Max. Max was a golden retriever with soft fur that gleamed like sunlight when he ran through the yard during the day. He had been part of her family for 6 years now, ever since she adopted him from a local shelter as a puppy. To Emily, Max wasn't just a pet, he was her best friend. That particular evening, the air outside was cool and crisp, signaling the approach of autumn. The trees lining her street were beginning to shed their leaves, scattering patches of yellow and orange across her front yard. Inside, however, everything was warm and inviting. Emily lit a few candles, filling the living room with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon. She settled onto her favorite armchair, wrapped herself in a cozy blanket, and opened the book she'd been reading all week. It was one of those mystery novels where nothing seemed to make sense until the very last page. A perfect escape after a stressful week of numbers and spreadsheets. Max lay on the floor beside her, his head resting on his paws. Every so often he would lift his ears slightly, listening to the faint sounds coming from outside, the distant hum of cars driving by, the rustle of leaves blowing in the wind, or the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. But mostly, he stayed, still, content to be near Emily. She reached down every few minutes to stroke his fur, and each time she did, his tail thumped against the wooden floorboards with a rhythmic thud-thud-thud. It was a sound Emily found oddly comforting, like a heartbeat that reminded her she wasn't alone. As the hours passed, the house grew quieter. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the walls before disappearing completely. Emily turned on a lamp, its soft glow illuminating the room without being too harsh. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It read 9:30. Not late enough to go to bed yet, but late enough to start winding down. She decided to make herself a cup of tea, something soothing to help her relax further. In the kitchen, the kettle whistled softly as the water came to a boil. Emily poured the steaming liquid into a mug and added a splash of milk. She carried the tea back to the living room, careful not to spill a drop. Max lifted his head briefly when she returned, watching, her movements with sleepy eyes before resting his chin back on his paws. Emily smiled at him, marveling at how peaceful he always seemed. It was hard to imagine anything disturbing this calm, quiet moment. But peace can be deceptive, especially in the middle of the night. Little did Emily know, the tranquility of her home was about to be shattered in a way she couldn't have anticipated. For now, though, everything felt safe. Everything felt normal. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the warmth spread through her body, chasing away the chill of the approaching fall season. Outside, the world continued its steady rhythm, the wind whispering through the trees, the crickets chirping in the grass. But inside, it was just Emily and Max, two souls sharing a quiet evening together. Though Emily didn't realize it at the time, there were signs that something unusual might happen later that night. Earlier that afternoon, Max had acted strangely. When they went for their usual walk, around the block he had stopped suddenly halfway through, refusing to move forward despite Emily's gentle coaxing. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air, and his ears swiveled back and forth, as if trying to catch some distant sound only he could hear. Eventually he shook himself off and resumed walking, but the brief pause lingered in Emily's mind. She dismissed it as nothing more than Max catching a whiff of something interesting, a squirrel or maybe another dog passing by earlier in the day. Back at home, Max seemed fine. He ate his dinner eagerly, wagging his tail as Emily praised him for finishing every bite. Later, while she worked on balancing her checkbook at the dining table, he curled up nearby, watching her with half-closed eyes. There was no indication that anything was amiss. In fact, everything about the evening felt reassuringly ordinary. Emily finished her tea, closed her book, and stretched lazily. "All right, buddy," she said to Max, standing up and stretching, again. "Time for bed?" Max stood up too, shaking himself awake and trotting after her as she headed upstairs. He followed her into the bedroom, circling twice before settling onto his dog bed in the corner. Emily climbed under the covers, turning off the light and leaving only the soft glow of the moonlight streaming through the window to illuminate the room. She listened to the familiar sounds of Max settling in, his deep sighs, the creak of the floor as he adjusted his position, and soon drifted off to sleep. It was almost midnight when the first strange noise woke Emily. At first she thought it was part of a dream. A low growl rumbled somewhere close by, jolting her out of her slumber. She blinked groggily, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. Then she heard it again, louder this time, unmistakably real. Her heart began to race as she realized the source of the noise. Max. He was standing at the foot of her bed, his body tense and rigid. His teeth were bared in a snarl, and his eyes glowed eerily in the dim light. Emily sat up quickly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Max?" she called softly, reaching out a hand toward him. Normally, he would respond instantly to her voice, bounding over to lick her fingers or nuzzle her hand. But tonight he didn't move. Instead, he continued to stare fixedly at the closed bedroom door, his growls growing louder with each passing second. Emily's pulse quickened. What could possibly have set him off like this? She strained her ears, trying to pick up any unusual sounds from beyond the door. At first there was nothing but silence. Then faintly, she heard it, a soft creak, barely audible, coming from somewhere downstairs. Her stomach twisted into knots. Was someone in the house? She reached for her phone on the nightstand, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked the screen. Should she call 911? Or was she overreacting? Maybe it was just the house settling, or perhaps Max had heard an animal outside. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Max had never acted like this before. He wasn't the type to bark unnecessarily or become agitated without cause. Whatever had caught his attention, it was serious. As Emily debated what to do next, Max let out a sharp bark, startling her. His leash, which she had forgotten to untangle earlier, snapped taut as he lunged toward the door, pulling against the bedpost with surprising strength. Emily's breath hitched in her throat. She had no choice but to face whatever was waiting for them. With shaking hands, she grabbed the baseball bat she kept under her bed and crept cautiously toward the bedroom door, her heart pounding in her chest. And so what had begun as a peaceful evening transformed into a night filled with tension and uncertainty. Emily had no idea what awaited her beyond that door, or how much her life was about to change because of Max's sudden, inexplicable behavior. All she knew was that her faithful companion was trying to protect her, and she owed it to him to stay strong. The sound of Max's barking echoed through the small bedroom, sharp and insistent. Emily stood frozen for a moment, her fingers gripping the baseball bat so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Max had always been a calm and friendly dog, playful during the day and gentle at night. He never growled or barked unless there was a clear reason, like a stranger approaching the front door or a loud noise startling him. But this was different. This wasn't just a warning bark, it was something deeper, something primal. Emily took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't let fear take over, not when Max was clearly trying to tell her something important. Slowly, she moved closer to the bedroom door, her bare feet making no sound on the carpeted floor. The creaking noise from downstairs came again, louder this time, followed by the faintest shuffle of footsteps. Her heart skipped a beat. Someone, or something, was definitely in her house. "Max, stay," she whispered, even though she knew he wouldn't obey. His leash was tangled around the bedpost, but his body was taut with tension, ready to spring into action if needed. His eyes never left the door, and his low growls sent chills down Emily's spine. She had never seen him like this before, so alert, so protective. It was as if he could sense danger in a way she couldn't. With trembling hands, Emily reached for the doorknob. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should call 911 first. But what would she tell them? That her dog was acting strange, and she thought someone might be in the house? They might think she was overreacting. No, she decided she needed to see for herself before involving the police. Taking another deep breath, She turned the knob slowly and pushed the door open just enough to peek out into the hallway. The upstairs corridor was dark, lit only by the pale moonlight streaming through the windows at either end. Everything looked normal, at least at first glance. The pictures hanging on the walls were undisturbed, and the door to the bathroom was slightly ajar, just as she had left it earlier that evening. But then she noticed something odd. A faint shadow moving near the staircase. It was subtle. Almost imperceptible, but it was there. A figure shifting in the darkness below. Emily's stomach tightened. She wanted to close the door and lock herself in the bedroom, but she knew she couldn't. If someone really was in her house, she needed to confront them, or at least figure out what they were doing. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she stepped into the hallway, keeping the baseball bat raised in front of her like a shield. Max let out another bark, straining against his leash as if urging her to hurry. "Who's there?" Emily called out, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to sound firm. There was no response, only silence. The shadow disappeared briefly, and for a moment she wondered if she had imagined it. Maybe it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. After all, old houses often made strange noises at night, the creak of wooden floors, the groan of pipes settling. But deep down she knew this was different. Max wouldn't react like this unless something was seriously wrong. As she crept toward the staircase, her pulse quickened. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though gravity itself was conspiring against her. The railing beneath her hand was cool and smooth, but her palm was slick with sweat. She paused at the top of the stairs, peering down into the living room. At first, everything seemed quiet and still. Then she heard it again, that faint creak accompanied by the unmistakable sound of someone rummaging through her kitchen cabinets. Her knees nearly buckled beneath her. Someone was definitely inside her house, and they weren't just passing through, they were looking for something. Panic surged through her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to lose control now, not when Max was depending on her to keep them both safe. "Hey!" she shouted, louder this time. "I know you're down there. Get out of my house!" For a brief moment everything went silent. Even Max stopped barking, his ears perked up as he listened intently. Then from the shadows below a muffled voice replied, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare anyone." The words caught Emily off guard. She hadn't expected an intruder to apologize. Whoever this person was, they sounded nervous maybe, even scared themselves. But that didn't change the fact that they were trespassing in her home. Clutching the baseball bat tighter, she took a cautious step down the stairs, her eyes scanning the dimly lit room for any sign of movement. "I don't care what you meant," she said, her voice steadier now. "You need to leave. Right now." There was a pause, and then the shadow shifted again. A figure emerged from the corner of the kitchen, their face obscured by the hood of a dark sweatshirt. They held up their hands defensively, backing away slowly. "Look, I didn't want to cause any trouble," the intruder said. "I was just looking for some cash. I didn't think anyone would be awake." Emily's jaw clenched. "You broke into my house," she said, her tone icy. "That's not no trouble. Now get out before I call the cops." The figure hesitated, glancing toward the back door. For a split second, Emily feared they might try to run past her, but Max's sudden snarl from upstairs changed their mind. The intruder flinched visibly, clearly intimidated by the sound of the angry dog. Without another word, they turned and bolted toward the exit, yanking the door open and disappearing into the night. Emily stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding in her ears. Had that really just happened? She lowered the baseball bat, her arms trembling from the adrenaline coursing through her body. Max's barking subsided, replaced by a series of anxious whines as he strained against his leash, desperate to reach her. She hurried back upstairs, untangling him quickly and pulling him into a tight hug. "It's okay, boy," she murmured, burying her face in his fur. "You did good. You kept us safe." Max wagged his tail weakly, his body finally relaxing as the immediate threat passed. Emily sat on the floor beside him, taking slow, deliberate breaths to steady herself. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, relief, anger, gratitude. But one thing was certain: She owed Max her life. If he hadn't woken her up, she might have slept through the entire ordeal, completely unaware of the danger lurking in her own home. After a few minutes, Emily forced herself to stand. She locked the back door and checked all the other entrances, making sure they were secure. Then she grabbed her phone and dialed 911, explaining what had happened in a shaky but determined voice. The operator assured her that officers would arrive soon and advised her to stay safe until then. While she waited, Emily paced the living room, her thoughts racing. Who was that person? Why had they chosen her house? And most importantly, how had Max known they were there before she did? Dogs were known for their keen senses, but this felt like more than just heightened hearing or smell. It was as if Max had sensed the intruder's presence on an instinctual level, reacting to something far beyond what humans could perceive. When the police arrived, they searched the house thoroughly and asked Emily a series of questions about the incident. They dusted for fingerprints and promised to look into recent break-ins in the area. Though they reassured her that she was safe now, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered long after they left. She double-checked the locks on all the doors and windows, then set up a chair in front of the back door just in case. Finally, exhausted but unable to sleep, she returned to the living room and sank onto the couch. Max lay down beside her, resting, his head on her lap. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, staring blankly at the wall as the events of the night replayed in her mind. She knew she would never forget this experience or the role Max had played in protecting her. As dawn began to break, casting a soft golden light through the windows, Emily realized something important. She wasn't alone. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she had Max by her side, a loyal companion who would do anything to keep her safe. And for the first time since the intruder had entered her home, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of peace. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting the living room in soft shades of gold and orange. Emily sat on the couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. She hadn't slept at all after the break-in, too shaken by the events of the night to even think about resting. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, watching her with wide, concerned eyes. It was as if he could sense her unease and wanted to comfort her in his own quiet way. Emily's mind kept replaying the intruder's voice, the apologetic tone, the nervous shuffle of feet, the hurried explanation about needing cash. Who was this person? Why had they chosen her house? These questions swirled endlessly in her thoughts, leaving her feeling restless and unsettled. She tried to focus on practical things instead, like making sure her home was secure. But every time she looked at the back door, she couldn't help but picture the figure slipping out into the night, vanishing like a shadow. When the police officers had arrived, they had been kind and professional, asking detailed questions and taking notes. They assured her that incidents like this were rare in her neighborhood, though not unheard of. One officer mentioned there had been a string of burglaries in nearby areas over the past few weeks, targeting homes that appeared empty or unguarded. Emily shuddered at the thought. What if she hadn't been home? What if Max hadn't been there to alert her? As the officers searched the house, Emily followed them silently, pointing out anything unusual. The kitchen drawers were slightly ajar, as though someone had rifled through them quickly before being interrupted. A chair near the dining table was pushed out of place, its legs scuffed against the floor, but nothing seemed to be missing. At least not that she could tell right away. Her wallet and purse were still where she'd left them, untouched. Even the small stash of emergency cash hidden in a jar on the top shelf of her pantry remained intact. It was almost as if the intruder had fled before they could take anything. Once the officers finished their inspection, they advised Emily to install additional security measures, a suggestion she took seriously. "It's better to be safe than sorry," one of them said, handing her a pamphlet about home security systems. She nodded absently, her mind already racing with ideas. Cameras, motion sensor lights, maybe even a reinforced lock for the back door. All of these things suddenly felt essential. She promised herself she would call a company first thing Monday morning to get everything set up. After the police left, Emily spent the rest of the morning cleaning and organizing, trying to distract herself from the lingering anxiety. She scrubbed, the countertops until they gleamed, rearranged the furniture just enough to make the space feel different, and vacuumed every corner of the house. Max trailed behind her, occasionally nudging her leg with his nose as if to remind her to take breaks. Each time he did, she stopped what she was doing and gave him a gentle pat, grateful for his constant presence. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion finally caught up with her. She collapsed onto the couch again, staring blankly at the wall while Max settled beside her. For a moment, she let herself imagine what life might have been like without him. Would she have woken up in time? Would the intruder have stayed longer, taken more, or worse, confronted her directly? The thought made her stomach churn. She leaned down and hugged Max tightly, burying her face in his fur. "You saved me last night," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how you knew, but you did. Thank you." Max wagged his tail lazily, nuzzling her hand in response. His loyalty and intuition never ceased to amaze her. Over the years, she had read stories about dogs sensing danger or warning their owners about impending disasters, but she had always dismissed them as exaggerations. Now she understood how real those instincts could be. Max wasn't just a pet. He was her protector, her guardian angel in furry form. As the day wore on, Emily began to feel a little more grounded. She decided to reward Max for his bravery by taking him to the park, one of their favorite places to visit together. The fresh air and open space would do them both good, she thought. So after grabbing a light jacket and Max's leash, they set off on the short walk to the nearby park. The park was bustling with activity when they arrived. Families strolled along the winding paths, children played on the swings, and joggers weaved between groups of people chatting on benches. Emily found a quiet spot under a large oak tree and sat down, letting Max roam freely within sight. He bounded happily across the grass, chasing leaves blown by the crisp autumn breeze and sniffing curiously at patches of dirt where other dogs had left their marks. Watching him play brought a smile to Emily's face for the first time since the break-in. It reminded her of simpler days before the stress of adult responsibilities and unexpected dangers had crept into her life. She remembered adopting Max as a puppy, how tiny and clumsy he had been back then. Now he was strong and confident, capable of protecting her in ways she hadn't fully appreciated until now. While Max explored, Emily pulled out her phone and scrolled through messages from friends and family. Several people had reached out after hearing about the break-in, offering words of support and advice. One friend suggested joining a local self-defense class, which Emily considered seriously. Another recommended installing a panic button system in case of future emergencies. Though she appreciated their concern, part of her wished everyone would stop treating her like she was fragile. She didn't want to live in fear, not when she had Max to rely on. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Emily called Max back to her side. He trotted over obediently, his tongue lolling out in a happy grin. She clipped his leash back on and stood up, brushing stray bits of grass off her jeans. "Ready to go home, buddy?" she asked, scratching behind his ears. He barked once, his tail wagging enthusiastically, and together they started the walk back. On the way home, Emily stopped at a pet store to pick up a new chew toy for Max. It was a small gesture, but it made her feel better knowing she could give him something special after everything he had done for her. When they returned to the house, she filled his food bowl with his favorite treats and watched as he gobbled them up eagerly. Then she fixed herself a sandwich, ate it slowly at the kitchen table, and spent the rest of the evening flipping through channels on the TV, searching for something soothing to watch. Despite her efforts to relax, Emily's mind kept drifting back to the break-in. She replayed the intruder's movements in her head, analyzing every detail she could remember. Something about the whole situation felt off, not just because someone had broken into her home, but because of how easily they had slipped away. It was almost as if they had expected no one to be there, as if they had planned their escape route carefully beforehand. Eventually, she decided to write down everything she remembered, hoping it might help the police identify the intruder. She grabbed a notebook and pen from her desk and jotted down key points: the dark sweatshirt, the nervous voice, the hurried exit. As she wrote, another thought occurred to her. What if the intruder came back? What if they realized she lived alone and decided to try again? The idea sent a chill down her spine. She glanced at Max, who was curled up on his bed in the corner of the living room. His eyes were closed, but his ears twitched occasionally, attuned to every sound around him. Knowing he was there gave her some comfort, but it wasn't enough. She needed to take action, to reclaim her sense of safety. That night, as she prepared for bed, Emily made a list of things she would do differently moving forward. First, she would call the security company bright and early on Monday. Second, she would enroll in a self-defense class no matter how intimidating it seemed. Third, she would start paying closer attention to her surroundings, trusting her instincts and Max's as much as possible. And finally, she would remind herself daily that she wasn't powerless. Yes, something scary had happened, but she had survived it. She had faced her fears head-on with Max by her side and come out stronger on the other side. As she climbed under the covers, Max curled up beside her bed as usual, his steady breathing filling the room. Emily closed her eyes, focusing on the rhythm of his breaths rather than the lingering doubts in her mind. Tomorrow would be a new day, a chance to rebuild her confidence and reinforce her sense of security. For now, though, she allowed herself to drift off, lulled by the comforting presence of her faithful companion. In the days that followed, Emily threw herself into making changes around the house. She installed cameras above the front and back doors, added motion sensor lights to the yard, and replaced the old locks with heavy-duty deadbolts. Neighbors noticed the upgrades and complimented her on taking such proactive steps. Some even joked that she should consider training Max as a guard dog professionally. Emily laughed at the suggestion, though deep down she knew he was already perfect at his job. Through it all, Max remained her constant source of strength and reassurance. Whether he was lounging by her feet during the day or standing watchful guard at night, his presence reminded her that she wasn't alone. Together, they formed a team, a bond forged not just by love, but by trust and mutual protection. And, as Emily adjusted to her new routine, she realized something important. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always have Max to. The days turned into weeks, and life slowly began to feel normal again for Emily. The initial shock of the break-in faded, replaced by a cautious sense of routine. She had taken every precaution she could think of to make her home safer, installing cameras, adding motion sensor lights, and even putting up signs in her yard warning that the property was under surveillance. Neighbors often commented on how thorough she was being, and some even joked about borrowing Max for their own security needs. Emily laughed along with them, though she knew they weren't entirely joking. Max truly was one of a kind. Despite all the changes, there were still moments when Emily found herself glancing over her shoulder or double-checking the locks on her doors. It wasn't constant paranoia, but rather an awareness, a heightened sensitivity to her surroundings that hadn't been there before. At night, she sometimes lay awake listening to the faintest sounds outside her window, wondering if the intruder might return. But each time those thoughts crept into her mind, she reminded herself of two things. First, that she had done everything possible to protect her home. And second, that Max was always nearby, ready to step in if needed. Max seemed to sense her lingering unease. He stayed closer to her than usual, following her from room to room as though he understood her need for reassurance. When she worked at the dining table during the evenings, he rested his head on her feet. When she cooked dinner, he sat patiently by the kitchen doorway, his eyes never straying far from hers. And when she went to bed, he positioned himself at the foot of her bed, guarding the door like a loyal sentinel. His unwavering presence gave her strength, reminding her that she wasn't alone in facing whatever challenges came her way. One Saturday morning, Emily decided it was time to take another step toward regaining her confidence. She had signed up for a self-defense class at the local community center, something she had been putting off out of nervousness. The thought of learning how to fight back against an attacker intimidated her, but she knew it was important. If anything ever happened again, she wanted to feel prepared, not just for her own sake, but also so she could better protect Max. The class was held in a large gymnasium with mirrored walls and padded mats covering the floor. About a dozen people were there, ranging from young women to older men, all eager to learn new skills. Emily felt out of place at first, unsure if she belonged among such a diverse group. But the instructor, a friendly woman named Linda, quickly put everyone at ease, with her warm smile and encouraging words. Self-defense isn't about brute strength, Linda explained during the introduction. It's about using your instincts, staying aware of your surroundings, and knowing what to do in a dangerous situation. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be smart. Those words resonated deeply with Emily. She realized that fear wasn't something she needed to conquer completely. Instead, she could channel it into action, using it to sharpen her focus and strengthen her resolve. As the class progressed, she practiced basic techniques like blocking punches, breaking, free from grabs, and delivering quick strikes to vulnerable areas. Though she stumbled a few times, she kept pushing herself, determined to improve. At the end of the session, Linda pulled Emily aside and complimented her effort. "You're doing great," she said. "I can tell you're serious about this. And that's half the battle. Keep practicing and you'll surprise yourself with how much stronger you become. Not just physically, but mentally too." Emily left the gym feeling a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time since the break-in, she felt proactive instead of reactive. She wasn't just waiting for bad things to happen anymore. She was taking steps to prevent them, or at least handle them better if they did occur. On the drive home, she thought about how proud Max would be if he could understand what she had accomplished that day. In a way, he already did. Every wag of his tail and every nuzzle of his nose seemed to say, "You've got this." Back at home, Emily rewarded herself and Max with a long walk through the park. The weather was crisp and cool, perfect for autumn. Leaves crunched beneath their feet as they strolled along the winding paths, enjoying the fresh air and sunshine. Max sniffed eagerly at every tree and bush, his tail wagging furiously whenever he spotted another dog. Emily let him linger, savoring the peacefulness of the moment. For a while, she forgot about the break-in entirely, focusing only on the beauty of the day and the joy of having Max by her side. As they walked, Emily reflected on how much her relationship with Max had deepened since that fateful night. Before the break-in, she had loved him dearly, of course, but now their bond felt even stronger. She appreciated him in ways she hadn't before, not just as a companion, but as a protector and confidant. He had shown her that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about standing your ground even when you were scared. And in doing so, he had inspired her to find that same courage within herself. When they returned home, Emily spent the rest of the afternoon tidying up the house and baking cookies, a simple pleasure she hadn't indulged in for a while. The smell of chocolate chips and vanilla filled the kitchen, making the whole house feel cozy and inviting. Max sat nearby, watching her movements with curious eyes. Occasionally, he sneaked close enough to snatch a stray piece of dough from the counter, earning a playful scolding each time. By the time the cookies were done, both of them were covered in flour, laughing or barking, despite themselves. That evening, as Emily settled onto the couch with a plate of warm cookies and a cup of tea, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for Max, for her safe home, and for the progress she had made in rebuilding her confidence. She knew life would always have its uncertainties. There would be challenges she couldn't predict or control, but she also knew she had the tools to face them. Between her growing self-reliance and Max's steadfast loyalty, she felt ready for whatever came next. Before heading to bed, Emily checked the cameras and locked the doors one last time. Then she called Max upstairs, where he curled up in his usual spot beside her bed. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought about how lucky she was to have him in her life. Not everyone had a guardian like Max, someone who could sense danger before it arrived and act without hesitation to keep them safe. To Emily, he wasn't just a dog, he was a hero. The next morning brought a surprise. When Emily opened her front door to pick up the newspaper, she noticed an envelope tucked inside the mailbox. It was plain white with no return address, and her name written neatly in black ink. Curious, she brought it inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short note. "I'm sorry for what I did. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Please forgive me." Emily stared at the words, her heart pounding. Was this from the intruder? Had they come back while she slept, leaving this apology behind? Or had they dropped it off earlier, hoping she wouldn't see them? She read the note several times, trying to make sense of it. There was no way to know for sure who had written it or why, but one thing was clear. Guilt had driven them to reach out. For a moment, Emily felt anger flare inside her. How dare they invade her home and then expect forgiveness? But as quickly as the anger came, it faded, replaced by sadness. Whoever this person was, they clearly regretted their actions. Maybe they had been desperate, acting out of need rather than malice. Maybe they were struggling with problems she couldn't imagine. She didn't excuse what they had done, but she found herself pitying them nonetheless. Max watched her quietly as she folded the note and placed it in a drawer. He seemed to sense her mixed emotions, nudging her hand gently until she scratched behind his ears. "What do you think, buddy?" she asked softly. "Should I forgive them?" He tilted his head, his expressive eyes meeting hers. Emily smiled faintly. Max couldn't answer her question, but his presence reminded her of something important. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or excusing harm. It was about choosing peace over resentment. Letting go of anger didn't mean she had to trust the intruder again. It simply meant she refused to let their actions define her happiness. With that thought in mind, Emily decided to move forward. She wouldn't dwell on the note or waste energy wondering who had sent it. Instead, she focused on the positive changes she had made in her life. The security upgrades, the self-defense classes, the deeper connection with Max. These were the things that mattered most, the things that would help her build a future full of safety and strength. Over the following weeks, Emily continued to thrive. Her self-defense skills improved with practice, and she grew more confident in her ability to handle difficult situations. The neighborhood buzzed with talk of upcoming holiday events, and Emily found herself looking forward to decorating her house and hosting friends for Thanksgiving. Life felt lighter, brighter, and more hopeful than it had in months. Through it all, Max remained her steadfast companion, sharing in her joys and comforting her during quiet moments. Together, they formed a partnership built on trust, love, and mutual protection. Emily knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always have Max by her side. A reminder that bravery comes in many forms, and true heroes walk on four legs just as often as two. As November rolled into December, the air grew colder and the days became shorter. Emily embraced the change of seasons with a renewed sense of purpose. The holidays were approaching, and she wanted this year to feel different, brighter, warmer, more meaningful. After everything that had happened, she felt a deep desire to celebrate life in all its small joys. And who better to share those moments with than Max? The first thing Emily did was decorate her home for Christmas. She pulled out boxes of ornaments, strings of lights, and wreaths from the attic, spreading festive cheer throughout every room. Max watched curiously as she worked, his tail wagging whenever she bent down to untangle a strand of garland or hang a shiny bauble on the tree. He even helped, in his own clumsy way, by batting at stray ornaments and chasing after ribbons that slipped from her fingers. By the time the house sparkled with holiday spirit, both of them were exhausted but happy. One evening, as Emily sat by the fireplace stringing popcorn for the tree, she glanced over at Max lying contentedly beside her. His golden fur glowed softly in the firelight and his eyes were half closed in peaceful relaxation. She smiled, thinking about how much he meant to her. "You deserve a gift too," she said aloud, setting aside the bowl of popcorn. The next day, Emily visited a pet store and picked out a special present for Max, a cozy new dog bed shaped like a reindeer, complete with antlers and a red nose. It was silly and playful, just like him. When she brought it home and placed it under the tree, Max sniffed it eagerly before plopping down onto it with an exaggerated sigh. Emily laughed, snapping a photo of him to send to her family. "Santa came early for this good boy," she captioned the picture. As the days passed, Emily found herself looking forward to the upcoming festivities with genuine excitement. She baked cookies, listened to carols, and wrapped gifts for her friends and family. Each activity brought a sense of accomplishment and joy, helping her leave behind the lingering shadows of fear from earlier in the fall. She realized that focusing on kindness and connection was healing, not just for her but for everyone around her. On a chilly Saturday morning, Emily bundled up in her coat and scarf, clipped Max's leash onto his collar, and headed downtown to browse the local holiday market. The streets were alive with energy, filled with people chatting, laughing, and sipping hot cocoa. Booths lined the sidewalks offering handmade crafts, baked goods, and seasonal treats. Max trotted happily beside her, drawing smiles and compliments from strangers who couldn't resist his friendly demeanor. At one booth, Emily stopped to admire a collection of hand-painted mugs. One caught her eye, a simple white mug with the words "Grateful Heart" painted in bold letters. She bought it on impulse, knowing it would be perfect for her morning coffee ritual. As she handed over the money, the vendor smiled warmly. "Looks like you've got a grateful heart already," the woman said, nodding toward Max. Emily followed her gaze and chuckled. "Yeah, I guess I do." Later that afternoon, as they strolled through the park, Emily noticed a group of children building a snowman near the playground. They giggled and shouted as they rolled giant balls of snow across the ground, their cheeks rosy from the cold. Max perked up at the sound of their laughter, tugging gently on his leash to get closer. Emily let him lead the way, watching as the kids greeted him with wide-eyed delight. One little girl, no older than 5, reached out timidly to pet him. When Max licked her mittened hand, she squealed with joy, hugging him tightly around the neck. Emily stood back, observing the scene, with a lump in her throat. There was something magical about seeing Max bring happiness to others, especially during such a joyful time of year. She thought about how easy it was to focus on the negative, the break-in, the note, the lingering unease. But how much richer life felt when she chose to focus on the positive instead. Moments like these reminded her of what truly mattered: love, connection, and the simple pleasures of everyday life. That night, as Emily prepared dinner, she reflected on how far she had come since the break-in. Back then, she had felt vulnerable and exposed, unsure of whether she could ever feel safe again. Now, though, she felt strong, not because nothing bad could happen, but because she knew she could handle whatever came her way. Between the self-defense, classes, the security upgrades, and Max's unwavering loyalty, she felt equipped to face the world head-on. After dinner, Emily curled up on the couch with a blanket and a cup of tea, flipping through old photo albums she had dug out of storage. Many of the pictures featured Max. Puppy Max chewing on shoes, teenage Max splashing in puddles, adult Max lounging in the sun. Each image brought back memories of laughter, adventure, and companionship. She marveled at how much he had grown over the years, yet how consistent his affection had remained. No matter what challenges they faced together, Max always greeted her with the same wagging tail and soulful eyes. Max jumped onto the couch beside her, resting his head on her lap. She scratched behind his ears absent-mindedly, smiling as he closed his eyes in bliss. "You're my best friend, you know that?" she murmured. He responded with a soft snore, making her laugh softly. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and quiet contentment, Emily felt truly grateful. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was full of beauty and meaning, and Max was at the heart of it all. A few days later, Emily received an invitation to a neighborhood potluck dinner. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to socialize so soon after everything that had happened. But then she remembered Linda, her self-defense instructor, telling her that courage wasn't about avoiding fear. It was about moving forward despite it. With that in mind, Emily accepted the invitation and spent the afternoon baking a batch of her famous gingerbread cookies to bring along. The potluck turned out to be exactly what she needed. Her neighbors welcomed her warmly, eager to hear about her recent changes and updates to her home. Several people complimented her bravery for handling the break-in so well, while others shared their own stories of overcoming challenges. Emily listened intently, realizing that resilience wasn't unique to her. It was something everyone carried within themselves, waiting to be tapped into when necessary. Max stayed by her side throughout the evening, charming everyone he met with his gentle nature and playful antics. At one point, a young boy asked if he could throw a tennis ball for Max in the backyard. Emily agreed, and soon a small crowd gathered to watch Max chase the ball with boundless enthusiasm. His joyful barks echoed through the crisp night air, bringing smiles to everyone's faces. For Emily, it was a reminder of how much Max enriched not just her life, but the lives of those around her. By the time they returned home, Emily felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Talking to her neighbors, sharing food and laughter, and watching Max spread happiness had done wonders for her spirit. She realized that healing wasn't something she had to do alone. It was a process that involved reaching out, connecting, and finding strength in community. The final weeks of December flew by in a blur of activity. Emily attended holiday parties, exchanged gifts with friends, and volunteered at a local shelter, serving meals to families in need. Each experience reinforced her belief in the power of kindness and gratitude. She also made a point to spend extra quality time with Max, taking long walks in the snow and playing fetch in the backyard. Together, they created new memories, filling their days with laughter and love. On Christmas Eve, Emily woke up early to prepare for the day ahead. She planned to host a small gathering at her house, just a few close friends and family members. As she bustled around the kitchen making breakfast, Max followed her every move, clearly excited by the hustle and bustle. When the doorbell rang later that afternoon, signaling the arrival of her first guests, he barked happily, wagging his tail so hard that his entire body wiggled. Throughout the evening, the house buzzed with conversation, music, and the clinking of glasses. Plates of food were passed around, stories were shared, and laughter filled the air. Emily looked around at the people she loved most, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. This was what life was all about. Not the fear or uncertainty, but the connections we build and the moments we cherish. As midnight approached, Emily stepped outside onto the porch with a cup of hot chocolate, Max trailing behind her. The night was clear and silent, the stars twinkling brightly overhead. She gazed up at the sky, breathing in the crisp winter air. Beside her, Max leaned against her leg, his warmth a comforting presence in the cold. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Max, the universe, or simply herself. Whatever the case, the sentiment felt right. She had faced darkness and emerged stronger, thanks in large part to the furry companion standing faithfully by her side. And as long as she had Max, she knew she could face anything. With that thought, Emily turned and went back inside, closing the door firmly behind her. The house was warm and inviting, filled with the sounds of celebration and joy. Tomorrow would bring a new year, new opportunities, and new adventures. But for now, she was content to savor the moment, surrounded by love, laughter, and the unshakable bond she shared with her hero, her loyal, brave, four-legged best friend. The new year arrived with a quiet calm, the kind that made Emily feel hopeful for what lay ahead. On New Year's Day, she woke up early, savoring the stillness of the morning before the world outside began to stir. Max was already awake, lying beside her bed and watching her with his big, soulful eyes. When she sat up, he wagged his tail lazily as if to say, "Good morning." Emily smiled and reached down to scratch behind his ears. "Happy New Year, buddy," she said softly. After getting dressed, Emily brewed a pot of coffee and stepped out onto the porch with a steaming mug in hand. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of frost clinging to the grass. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat on the wooden steps, letting the quiet of the neighborhood wash over her. Max settled at her feet, his warm body a comforting weight against her legs. Together they watched the sun rise slowly, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was a simple moment, but it filled her with peace. As the days turned into weeks, Emily continued to embrace the rhythm of her life, finding joy in the little things. Her mornings began with long walks through the park, where Max bounded happily, ahead sniffing every tree and greeting other dogs with enthusiastic barks. Afternoons were spent working from home, her laptop open on the dining table while Max napped nearby. Evenings brought cozy routines, cooking dinner, reading by the terror fire, or simply sitting on the couch with Max's head resting on her lap. Life felt steady again, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous fall. One Saturday afternoon, Emily decided to revisit the self-defense class she had started attending after the break-in. It had been a few months since she last went, and she missed the sense of empowerment it gave her. Plus, Linda, the instructor, had invited her back for a refresher session. When she arrived at the gym, she was greeted warmly by familiar faces, many of whom remembered her from before. Linda smiled when she saw Emily and gave her an encouraging nod. "Glad you're back," she said. "Let's keep building that strength." The session focused on advanced techniques, including how to defend against multiple attackers and use everyday objects, like keys or pens, as tools for protection. Emily practiced each move carefully, feeling more confident with every repetition. At one point, Linda paired her with another student for a sparring exercise. Though Emily hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready, she soon found herself moving instinctively, blocking punches and delivering counter-strikes with surprising precision. When the drill ended, her partner, a tall woman named Rachel, grinned and gave her a thumbs up. "You're tougher than you look," Rachel teased. Emily laughed, realizing how much she had grown since her first class. By the time the session ended, Emily felt invigorated. She stopped by the grocery store on the way home, picking up ingredients for a hearty stew. As she pushed her cart down the aisles, she noticed how different she felt compared to months ago. Back then, even a trip to the store had left her feeling anxious, constantly scanning her surroundings for potential threats. Now, though, she moved with ease, trusting her instincts and knowing she had the skills to handle whatever might come her way. Max trotted beside her in the cart, earning smiles from shoppers who couldn't resist his charm. That evening, as the stew simmered on the stove, Emily reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the break-in, the fear, the uncertainty, the lingering doubts, and realized how much it had shaped her. It wasn't just the security upgrades or the self-defense classes that had changed her life. It was the mindset shift. She no longer saw herself as someone who needed protecting. Instead, she viewed herself as capable, resilient, and strong, and none of it would have been possible without Max. Max seemed to sense her thoughts, padding into the kitchen and resting his chin on her knee. She bent down to hug him tightly, her voice soft as she spoke. "You've taught me so much, you know that? I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." He responded with a contented sigh, his tail thumping against the floor. In that moment, Emily knew their bond was unbreakable. They weren't just owner and pet. They were partners, teammates, best friends. A few days later, Emily received a call from her neighbor, Mrs. Harper, who lived 2 houses down. Mrs. Harper was an elderly woman who often baked cookies and left them on Emily's doorstep as a gesture of kindness. This time, however, her tone was urgent. "Emily, dear, could you come over for a moment?" she asked. "I need your help with something." Concerned, Emily grabbed her coat and headed over, Max trotting faithfully at her side. When she arrived, Mrs. Harper greeted her at the door, looking flustered. "It's my cat, Whiskers," she explained. "He got stuck in the tree again and I can't reach him. I thought maybe Max could, encourage him to come down." Emily glanced at the towering oak in Mrs. Harper's yard, where a small gray tabby clung precariously to a high branch. Max tilted his head, clearly intrigued by the situation. Though he wasn't exactly known for climbing trees, his presence often calmed animals, making them more likely to cooperate. Sure enough, when Emily called out gently to Whiskers, Max barked once, his deep voice echoing through the yard. The cat froze for a moment, then began inching cautiously toward the trunk. Within minutes, Whiskers leapt gracefully to the ground, darting straight into Mrs. Harper's arms. "Oh, thank you both so much," Mrs. Harper exclaimed, hugging her cat tightly. She turned to Max and patted his head affectionately. "You're quite the hero, aren't you?" Max wagged his tail proudly, clearly pleased with himself. Emily chuckled, realizing yet again how special he was, not just to her, but to everyone lucky enough to cross his path. As February approached, Emily decided to take on a new challenge, volunteering at a local animal shelter. She had always loved animals, and spending time with Max had deepened her appreciation for the unique bonds humans could form with their furry companions. The shelter welcomed her enthusiastically, assigning her tasks like walking dogs, cleaning, kennels, and assisting during adoption events. Max accompanied her whenever possible, becoming something of a mascot for the organization. His friendly demeanor put nervous animals at ease, and his playful antics brought smiles to visitors' faces. One Saturday, during an adoption event, Emily met a young boy named Ethan who was searching for a dog to adopt. He wandered through the rows of kennels, peering intently at each animal until he spotted a scruffy terrier mix named Lucky. Ethan's face lit up instantly, and he knelt down to press his nose against the cage. "This is the one," he whispered to his mom. Emily helped facilitate the adoption process, answering questions and sharing tips on caring for a new pet. Before they left, Ethan hugged Max tightly, thanking him for helping him find his new best friend. Emily watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with pride. Max truly had a gift for bringing people together. Back at home, Emily continued to nurture her own relationship with Max, cherishing the moments they shared. They explored new trails at the park, tried out recipes for homemade dog treats, and spent lazy afternoons lounging in the sun. Each day brought opportunities to create memories, and Emily made sure to document them all, snapping photos, jotting notes in a journal, and saving mementos like paw prints pressed into clay. One evening, as spring began to creep into the air, Emily sat on the porch with Max curled up at her feet. She held a photo album in her lap, flipping through pages filled with pictures of their adventures together. There was Max as a puppy, chewing on a shoe, Max splashing in a stream during a hike, Max wearing a silly birthday hat, his tongue lolling out in a goofy grin. Each image reminded her of how much he had enriched her life, not just through companionship, but through lessons in courage, loyalty, and unconditional love. "You're my hero, you know that?" Emily said, closing the album and setting it aside. Max lifted his head, gazing up at her with those expressive eyes. She leaned down to kiss the top of his head, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Max rested his head back on his paws, exhaling a contented sigh. In that moment, Emily knew she didn't need to worry about the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Max by her side. Together, they had weathered storms, celebrated victories, and built a partnership rooted in trust and love. And as long as they had each other, nothing else really mattered. The stars began to twinkle in the night sky, casting a gentle glow over the quiet neighborhood. Emily wrapped her arms around her knees, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was full of beauty, connection, and endless possibilities. With Max beside her, she knew she could handle anything that came her way. For now, though, she was content to sit in the stillness, savoring the simple joy of being together. And so, as the seasons changed and the years rolled on, Emily and Max continued to live their lives with hearts wide open. They faced challenges, celebrated triumphs, and created countless memories along the way. Through it all, their bond remained unshakable, a testament to the power of love, loyalty, and the extraordinary friendships we forge with our four-legged companions.